Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and we're going to talk about Tifa Lockhart's breasts. Yes, we're going to talk about Tifa Lockhart and her bosom, and the reason we're going to talk about that is because for some reason it has been a topic of discussion in regards to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They were sort of hiding Tifa from the fans for quite some time. We finally did get to see her in the latest trailer at E3. And the reaction was mixed. Now, her chest is not as large as it was in the original game, and as how she's been depicted in other media. It does seem like they reined it in a little bit, although she is not flat-chested, which is good because that's what a lot of fans were sort of afraid of, given the climate in today's gaming industry, given the backlash by a lot of gaming journalists. I'm doing air quotes, you can't see them. Before we get into the video, please subscribe for more content. If you like the content here at Clownfish TV, we'd love to have you on board, and it definitely helps the channel if you do that. So this is coming from Bounding Into Comics. Tifa's breast size was determined by committee, by an ethics department at Square Enix, right? Final Fantasy VII Remake director confirms Tifa's chest was tightened because of ethics department at Square Enix. You cannot make this up. Can you imagine coming in Monday morning, coming into work and being like, what's on the docket today, guys? Oh, we're going to talk about Tifa's boobs. That's what we're going to talk about, and how big they should be in this game. And we're going to sit down at the ethics department to figure out just how big Tifa's boobs should be in this game. Okay, so Final Fantasy VII Remake director Tetsuya Nomura confirmed that Tifa's chest was tightened due to the ethics department at Square Enix. The comments came from an interview with Weekly Famitsu, as reported by Niche Gamer. Nomura specifically discussed Tifa Lockhart's design for Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I love that they're just calling it Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, I mean, could you be more on the nose than that? I mean, we're not going to call it something fancy, Final Fantasy VII Reunion, or Final Fantasy VII Again, or Final Fantasy 16, now with more Final Fantasy VII. No, we're going to just call it Final Fantasy VII Remake. Literally, that is the name of the game. We wanted Tifa to have abs, so she now has more of an athletic body type. Makes sense. She is a martial artist. The ethics department at Square Enix also said we had to tighten her chest so it doesn't look unnatural during all the intense fighting. Because of that, we added black thigh highs and a tank top. Because of her chest? No, you just add a tank top and thigh highs to cover more of her up, I think. But yeah, they didn't want to go full Dead or Alive. They didn't want Tifa jiggling as she's fighting fictitious monsters. We didn't want the fictitious video game character to jiggle too much as she fights fictitious monsters in a fictitious fantasy world, a dystopian fantasy world. Nomura's comments are similar to those made by Mortal Kombat's art director Stephen Barron, as he attempted to justify the radical changes that desexualize the female Mortal Kombat characters. Now, I don't think the changes to Tifa were radical. I think, they sort of met halfway. But yeah, people are more concerned, I think, that they have a committee discussing what's ethical in video games, discussing whether or not her boobs are too big. Mark Kern, former team lead for Vanilla World of Warcraft, mocked the idea of an ethics department to regulate the breast size of fictitious characters in video games. Imagine having a department fully funded to regulate breast size in the games you make. Yeah, I mean, people are getting paid. They're being paid to look at Tifa's boobs and determine whether or not her boobs are too big. That's their job. Literally, you go into work every day and take a look at Tifa's boobs. And you get paid for that. Mark Kern goes on to say, gamers are making a big deal out of boobs because they're gamers, in quotes, because that's what, the polygons, etc. are going to say. No AAA developers funding entire departments to monitor boob size for ethics is what's making this a big deal. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. We're just sitting here laughing at you. And this is a very astute observation here. We're literally back to this point in time. Congrats, they're measuring her swimwear to see if it covers up enough of her legs, because we don't want to be too sexy. We don't want those middle-aged ladies to be too sexy at the beach. And see those little boys with the male gaze? looking at the sexy middle-aged lady. Yeah, you know what that kid's thinking. You know what, and look at this kid. Looking at her, looking at Maud. Look at that. It's too sexy. Too sexy. The eyebrows didn't end with the idea of an ethics department to regulate Tifa's bust size. Nomura also noted that they have changed the Honeybee Inn cross-dressing event. Yes, if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, and I'm really shocked that you haven't, given that it's been out for 20 plus years and has been on pretty much every console in some incarnation, and is actually pretty cheap to buy on Steam. If you haven't played it, then let me explain to you. Cloud cross dresses at some point in the game for laughs. They play it off for laughs. And as I recall, he's chased around by a mobster who wants to cop a feel of Cloud's bosoms or behind. Yeah, so it worked with super deformed characters back in 1997. I wondered how this was going to play out current year with photorealistic characters, and I also wondered, if the climate would allow for us to use cross-dressing as a joke current year. Apparently, the ethics brigade, the ethics division at Square Enix, has also weighed in on that. The Honeybee Inn cross-dressing event is still in the game. We've made it more modern. If we made the place like we did in the original game, the physical uneasiness would be overwhelming, so that was no good. I do agree to some extent. I think some of the things in Final Fantasy VII are just not going to translate well into this hyper-realistic game. Some of the, there was some stuff in there that just, I just didn't think was going to work. Some of the bad guys, some of the enemies were kind of doofy. I mean, we had houses with arms and dudes flying around on playing cards and all this really weird stuff. Because, this was the first 3D Final Fantasy game. They had some really strange enemies in the 2D Final Fantasy games. And, I think they kind of got a good grasp on what works in 3D and what doesn't with Final Fantasy VIII going forward. But yeah, I expect changes. I expect a lot of changes, actually, because I think this game is going to be Final Fantasy VII in name only. I think it's basically Final Fantasy XVI with a coat of Final Fantasy VII paint. I think they're going to take the basic plot of 7, the characters, and it's going to be familiar enough, but it's basically going to be an all-new game. So don't expect it to be a carbon copy of the original. The Honeybee Inn, for those who are either unfamiliar or don't remember, is a bee-themed brothel that is run by crime boss Don Corneo. Tifa attempts to infiltrate the brothel by posing as one of Corneo's call girls after learning he is an informant for Shinra. However, Cloud believes Tifa has been kidnapped. In order to rescue Tifa, he dresses up and poses as a woman. The announcement of an ethics department at Square Enix comes after conflicting reports regarding Sony's strict content censorship policy. Yeah, this has been a topic of discussion with gamers for the last year or so, that Sony is censoring the hell out of games. So, Square Enix maybe is being proactive in censoring themselves so they don't get censored by Sony's censors. A report from the Wall Street Journal cited a Sony spokeswoman who confirmed Sony had a censorship policy in place in order to not inhibit the sound growth and development of young people. We don't want to inhibit the sound growth and development of young people, because remember back in the day, Doom and Mortal Kombat, what they did to all the young people. All the young people were ruined, completely ruined. Their brains rotted from all these video games, Doom and Mortal Kombat, and the ultra violence that we had to go to Congress and get ratings slapped on the games to protect the children. So that's all they're doing. They're protecting the children. The report indicates that this new policy came about because of the Me Too movement. Oh, never mind. The rise of people watching gamers play on YouTube and Twitch. This came about because of the Me Too movement. Okay, so I don't know how this is going to play out in the Honeybee Inn. However, a conflicting report from a Sony spokesperson in Japan would surface within the same week. The spokesperson noted that Sony had not introduced new rules. However, they did indicate that games are looked at on a case-by-case basis by Sony executives. The spokesman also noted that the executives look at a global standard when they're reviewing content. He noted the process is generally reserved for strict sexual content. strict content. This scene, though, I do expect to play out very differently. It's a little different with photorealistic characters than it would be with these super deformed characters in 1997. It's possible Square Enix might have created an ethics department in order to deal with censorship coming from Sony. So what do you think? What do you think? I think this game is again going to be Final Fantasy VII in name only. It is absolutely going to be a new game with a new game mechanics, gameplay. It doesn't look... I mean, it's familiar enough with the characters and the music, but it's not, I don't think, going to be a carbon copy of Final Fantasy VII. Expect changes. And I think the changes are probably going to be more extreme than what we're seeing. I think this is just sort of they're kind of like testing the waters, like, okay, what if we put more clothes on Tifa? What if we warn people ahead of time that the Honeybee Inn scene might be a little different, you know, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, don't expect a carbon copy of Final Fantasy VII. I never expected a carbon copy of Final Fantasy VII. I'm just trying to figure out why it took them so long to remake Final Fantasy VII. Okay, because we could have actually done more of a carbon copy remake of it 10 or 15 years ago and been over and done with it and then moved on to 16. And really, I think this is about bankability. I think Final Fantasy VII has been the most successful Final Fantasy of all time. And yeah, they want to go back to it. Square Enix is pulling a Disney. They're going back and they're making a live action, quote unquote, remake of their hits, their greatest hits. And that's what this is. It's going to be a live action, photorealistic HD remake of their biggest hit. And they're doing it for money, simply put. It's all about the money. You know, instead of making a really kick-ass Final Fantasy 16, you know, we're going back to the well and just, you know, replaying our greatest hits. So, but in regards to Tifa, there you go. So now we know the mystery of Tifa's breasts. If you were her breast size, if you were worried about it, blame the, if you're concerned. So back to Tifa's bosom. If you are concerned about Tifa's breasts, if you are concerned about their size, contact the ethics department at Square Enix and they can answer all of your questions. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.